What would you do if your husband handed you divorce papers after seeing something he shouldn't have? How can one walk home with a stranger end up ruining an entire marriage? I never thought a single night would have legal consequences, but the documents in my hand said otherwise. The bass thumped through the downtown bar as I finished my third Cosmopolitan, the pink liquid courage flowing through my veins like liquid fire. At 32, I told myself I deserved this, a night away from spreadsheets, from Sophie's endless questions about homework, from Elliot's silent disapproval that seemed to follow me around our suburban house like a shadow. "Morwenna, you need to live a little," shouted Jessica over the music, her blonde hair catching the neon lights as she gestured wildly with her martini glass. "When's the last time you actually had fun?" I laughed, but it came out bitter. "Fun? What's that? Between work and being a mum, I barely remember what fun looks like." The group of women around me, my college friends who still made time for monthly girls' nights, nodded sympathetically. Sarah leaned in closer, her voice conspiratorial. "You know what your problem is. You let Elliot control everything. When's the last time you did something spontaneous?" My phone buzzed against the sticky bar top. Elliot's name flashed on the screen. "How's girls' night? What time should I expect you home?" I stared at the message, irritation flaring in my chest. Even when I was out, he had to check up on me like I was some teenager with a curfew. I shoved the phone back into my purse without responding. "See what I mean?" Sarah said, having caught a glimpse of the screen. "He's tracking your every move." "It's not tracking," I protested weakly. "He's just concerned." "Concerned or controlling?" Jessica raised an eyebrow. "There's a difference, hun." The bartender appeared before I could answer, tall, dark-haired, with the kind of easy smile that made my stomach flutter in a way it hadn't in years. His name tag read Liam. "Another round for the ladies?" he asked, his eyes lingering on mine just a moment longer than necessary. "Actually," I heard myself saying, "make mine a double." Liam grinned. "Rough week?" "Rough marriage," I muttered, then immediately felt guilty for saying it out loud. "I hear that," he said, mixing my drink with practiced ease. "Sometimes you just need to remember who you were before. All the responsibilities." Something about the way he said it, the understanding in his dark eyes, made my heart race. When he slid the drink across to me, his fingers brushed mine, and I didn't pull away. My phone buzzed again. This time I turned it face down without looking. By closing time, my friends were calling Ubers and debating whether to hit another bar. The responsible part of me, the part that had to get Sophie ready for school in the morning, knew I should go home. But the part of me that felt invisible in my own life, the part that craved attention and validation, wasn't ready for the night to end. "I think I'm going to walk," I announced, surprising myself. "Walk? It's like 15 blocks," Rachel, my sister, said with concern. "And it's past midnight." "I need the fresh air," I insisted. "Clear my head before I go home." Liam was wiping down glasses behind the bar. "Walking alone isn't safe this time of night," he said. "I get off in 10 minutes. I could walk with you if you want. Make sure you get home okay." The offer hung in the air like a question mark. I knew I should say no. I knew accepting would cross a line I'd never crossed before. But the alcohol and the attention, and the way he looked at me like I was interesting, like I was worth noticing, made the decision for me. "That would be nice," I said. Rachel frowned. "Morwenna, maybe you should just take a cab." "It's fine," I waved her off. "It's just a walk." Just a walk. That's what I told myself as Liam finished closing duties. Just a walk with a friendly stranger who was being a gentleman. Nothing more. The October air was crisp against my flushed cheeks as we stepped onto the sidewalk. The city streets were mostly empty, except for the occasional late-night pedestrian or car passing by. Liam walked close enough that our arms occasionally brushed, sending little electric shocks through my system. "So," he said as we turned onto my street, "what's the story with the rough marriage?" I should have deflected. Should have made small talk about the weather, or work, or anything else. Instead, I found myself opening up to this virtual stranger about how lonely I felt, how Elliot and I barely talked anymore beyond logistics, about Sophie's schedule and household maintenance. "He's not a bad guy," I said, aware that I was probably sharing too much. "He's just distant, like he's already checked out of our marriage but forgot to tell me." "That's rough," Liam said sympathetically. "Everyone deserves to feel appreciated." The validation felt like a warm blanket. When was the last time Elliot had made me feel appreciated? When was the last time he'd really listened to me, looked at me the way Liam was looking at me now? We'd reached my house, a modest 2-story colonial with Elliot's sedan parked in the driveway. Most of the windows were dark except for the porch light I'd left on. "This is me," I said, suddenly nervous about the evening ending. "Nice place," Liam said, but he was looking at me, not the house. We stood there for a moment, the air thick with possibility. I knew I should thank him for walking me home and go inside. Instead, I found myself stepping closer. "Thank you," I said softly, "for tonight, for making me feel normal again." "You're more than normal," he said, his voice low. "You're beautiful. Your husband's an idiot if he doesn't see that." Before I could think about what I was doing, I hugged him. It was supposed to be a quick, friendly goodbye hug, but it lingered. His arms tightened around me, and for just a moment, I let myself melt into the embrace of someone who wanted to hold me. That's when the headlights flashed. I didn't see the car idling at the curb, didn't notice the familiar silhouette behind the wheel. I was too caught up in the moment, in the feeling of being desired, to pay attention to anything else. Liam pulled back first, glancing around nervously. "I should go," he said. "Yeah," I agreed, though part of me wanted to invite him in for coffee, wanted to extend this feeling of being alive and wanted just a little longer. He squeezed my hand once before walking away, disappearing into the shadows between streetlights. I watched him go, then fumbled for my keys, my head spinning from alcohol and adrenaline and the lingering scent of his cologne. As I unlocked the front door, I heard a car engine start somewhere behind me. By the time I turned around, the street was empty, except for the usual parked cars and the yellow glow of streetlights. Inside, the house was quiet. Elliot must have already gone to bed. I kicked off my heels and tiptoed upstairs, grateful not to have to explain myself tonight. Tomorrow I'd tell him I had a good time with the girls, maybe had one too many drinks, and took a cab home. Simple, clean. No need to mention Liam or the walk or the way my heart was still racing. Just a walk home with a friendly stranger, nothing more. But as I lay in bed next to my sleeping husband, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of the evening, I knew I was lying to myself. Something had shifted tonight, some line had been crossed, and there would be consequences. I just didn't know yet how severe they would be. The morning sun streamed through our bedroom windows as I pretended to sleep, listening to Elliot's alarm clock buzz at exactly 6:30 a.m., like it had every weekday for the past 8 years. Through my half-closed eyelids, I watched him get up with his usual methodical precision, feet on the floor, stretch, walk to the bathroom without so much as glancing in my direction. My head pounded from last night's drinks, but more than that, guilt gnawed at my stomach like a living thing. In the harsh light of day, my evening with Liam felt different, less romantic, more reckless. What had I been thinking? But then I remembered the way Liam had looked at me, really looked at me, like I was worth seeing. When was the last time Elliot had looked at me that way? When was the last time he'd made me feel beautiful or interesting or like anything more than a roommate who happened to share his bed? I heard the shower turn on and finally allowed myself to fully wake up. Sophie would be up soon, wanting breakfast and help finding her favorite sweater and a million other things that required my attention. I needed to get my story straight before then. By the time Elliot emerged from the bathroom, I was sitting up in bed, scrolling through my phone with studied casualness. "Morning," he said, his voice neutral. He was already dressed for work, khakis and a button-down shirt, the uniform of a high school history teacher who'd long ago stopped caring about making an impression. "Morning," I replied, not looking up from my screen. "How was girls' night?" The question was casual, but something in his tone made me glance up. He was standing by his dresser, adjusting his watch, but his eyes were on me in the mirror's reflection. "Fine," I said. "Good. We went to that new place downtown, had some drinks, caught up on gossip. You know how it is." "What time did you get home?" Now I definitely heard something in his voice. Not quite suspicion, but not quite casual interest either. "I don't know. Late." "Why?" "Just wondering. I tried to wait up but fell asleep around midnight." Liar, I thought. If he'd been asleep, he wouldn't know what time I got home, but I kept my expression neutral. I told the girls I couldn't stay out too late because of Sophie's school in the morning, but you know how time flies when you're having fun. "How did you get home? Uber?" The questions were starting to feel like an interrogation. "Does it matter?" "I'm just asking, Morwenna. You seemed pretty drunk when you came in." "I wasn't drunk," I said, though we both knew that wasn't true. "And I don't appreciate being questioned like I'm some teenager who missed curfew." Elliot turned away from the mirror to face me directly. "I'm not questioning you. I'm your husband. I worry when you're out late and don't answer your phone." "What are you talking about? I answered your phone." "I texted you twice. You never responded." Shit. I'd forgotten about ignoring his messages. "I was having fun with my friends. I didn't want to be on my phone all night." "Right." He picked up his briefcase, and I could see him mentally filing away my answers for later analysis. "Who drove you home?" "Why does it matter?" "Because I care about your safety. Because I want to know that my wife got home safely." There it was again, that word. Wife. The way he said it made it sound like a burden, like a responsibility he'd rather not have. "I got home fine, obviously. I'm sitting right here." "I know you're sitting right here, Morwenna. I'm asking how you got here." The persistence was starting to piss me off. "I took a cab, okay? Happy now?" He studied my face for a long moment, and I had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through me. "Okay," he said finally. But it didn't feel okay. It felt like he was storing up ammunition for a fight we weren't quite ready to have yet. Sophie's voice drifted down the hallway. "Mummy, I can't find my blue shirt." And I seized the opportunity to escape this conversation. "I need to get Sophie ready," I said, jumping out of bed. "Morwenna," Elliot said as I reached the bedroom door. I turned back, my heart hammering. "Next time, just text me back, so I know you're okay." I nodded and hurried out of the room, but his words followed me down the hall. Next time. Like he was already planning for me to lie to him again. In Sophie's room, I helped her find the blue shirt and braided her hair while she chatted about a spelling test and some drama with her best friend Emma. The normalcy of it should have been comforting, but I felt like I was acting in a play, going through the motions of being a mother and wife, while my mind was still back on that dark street corner with Liam. "Mummy, are you and Daddy fighting?" Sophie asked as I walked her to the kitchen for breakfast. The question caught me off guard. "What? No, sweetheart. Why would you think that?" "You seem sad, and Daddy seems mad." Kids were too perceptive. "Daddy's not mad, he's just tired. And Mummy's not sad, just a little sleepy from staying up late with my friends." Sophie seemed to accept this explanation, but she stayed close to me as I made her cereal and packed her lunch, like she was afraid I might disappear if she let me out of her sight. Elliot came downstairs just as I was zipping up Sophie's backpack. He kissed the top of her head and grabbed his travel mug of coffee, but he didn't look at me. "Have a good day at school, baby girl," he told Sophie. "You too, Daddy. Don't let the high schoolers be mean to you." He laughed, the first genuine expression I'd seen from him all morning. "I'll try not to." Then he was gone, and I was left alone with my daughter and my guilt. After dropping Sophie off at school, I sat in my car in the parking lot and checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my mother and a string of texts from my sister Rachel. "Hope you got home okay last night." That guy seemed nice, but maybe not the best idea. Call me when you get this. I deleted the texts without responding and drove to work, where I spent the day staring at spreadsheets and trying not to think about the way Liam had smiled at me or the way Elliot had looked at me this morning, like he was seeing a stranger. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally shifted in my marriage overnight. The careful distance Elliot and I had maintained, the polite coexistence that had passed for partnership, felt different now. Charged, dangerous. That evening, Elliot came home later than usual. Sophie was already in bed, and I was cleaning up the dinner dishes when I heard his key in the lock. "Hey," I said when he walked into the kitchen. "There's leftover pasta in the fridge if you're hungry." "Thanks." He loosened his tie and sat down at the kitchen table, watching me load the dishwasher. "How was your day?" "Fine. Boring, the usual." I kept my back to him, focusing on the dishes. "How was yours?" "Interesting." Something in his tone made me turn around. He was holding his phone, scrolling through something with a frown. "Interesting how?" "I had to run some errands after work. Stopped by the electronics store." My blood went cold. "Oh?" "Yeah, needed to pick up a new dash cam. Mine seems to have gone missing." The dish I was holding slipped from my hands and clattered into the sink. "Missing?" Weird, right? I could have sworn I left it in the car yesterday, but this morning it was gone. Can't imagine where it went. He was looking at me now, really looking at me, and I felt like a bug under a microscope. "Maybe it fell out when you got out of the car." "Maybe." He set his phone down on the table. "Or maybe someone took it." "Who would take a dash cam?" "I don't know, Morwenna. Who would?" We stared at each other across the kitchen, and I realized we weren't talking about a dash cam anymore. We were talking about secrets and lies, and the growing chasm between us that neither of us was ready to acknowledge out loud. "I'm sure it'll turn up," I said finally. "I'm sure it will." He stood up and walked toward the stairs. "I'm going to shower and grade some papers. Try not to stay up too late." After he left, I slumped against the kitchen counter and tried to calm my racing heart. A dash cam. Had he been recording when he drove by last night? Had he seen me with Liam? But if he had proof, wouldn't he have confronted me directly? Elliot wasn't the type to play games. If he knew something, he'd say something. Unless he was gathering evidence, building a case. I shook my head, trying to dispel the paranoid thoughts. I was overthinking this. Elliot was suspicious, sure, but he didn't know anything for certain. And even if he had seen me with Liam, what had he really seen? A friendly conversation, a hug goodbye. Nothing that couldn't be explained away. I just had to stay calm and stick to my story. It was just a walk home with a stranger who was being helpful, nothing more. But as I turned off the kitchen lights and headed upstairs to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap of my own making. The first sign of trouble came 3 days later, during my lunch break at work. I was scrolling through Instagram when a notification popped up. Someone had tagged me in a photo. My stomach dropped when I saw it, a grainy but unmistakable image of me and Liam standing outside my house, his arms around me in what could only be described as an intimate embrace. The photo had been posted by Jessica from Girls' Night with the caption, "Looks like someone had more fun than she let on." Girls' Night, living your best life. My hand shook as I read the comments already accumulating below. "OMG Morwenna, who's the hottie?" "Get it, girl." "Wait, isn't she married?" "That's not her husband." I immediately called Jessica, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Hey, babe," she answered cheerfully. "Did you see the pic? You two looked so cute together." "Jessica, you need to delete that photo right now." "What? Why? It's adorable." "Because I'm married. Because my husband might see it. Because—" I lowered my voice, aware that my co-workers were starting to stare. "Because it's not what it looks like." "Oh, come on, Morwenna. We all saw how you were flirting with that bartender. And honestly, good for you. Elliot's been treating you like a roommate for years. It was just a friendly hug goodbye. He walked me home to make sure I was safe. Sure it was. Jessica's tone was knowing, almost smug. Look, I'm not judging. We all need a little excitement in our lives. But you can't pretend nothing happened. Nothing did happen, and you need to delete that photo. Fine, but you're being way too paranoid. It's just a picture. But the damage was already done. By the time Jessica deleted the post an hour later, it had been screenshot and shared in our college group chat, liked by dozens of people, and seen by God knows who else. I spent the rest of the workday in a state of barely controlled panic, jumping every time my phone buzzed, expecting Elliot to call and demand an explanation. But he didn't call. He didn't text. The silence was somehow worse than confrontation would have been. That evening, I tried to act normal. I made dinner, helped Sophie with her homework, and chatted about our days like nothing had changed. But I could feel Elliot watching me, studying my every move and expression like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Everything okay?" he asked as we were getting ready for bed. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" "You seem nervous about something." "I'm not nervous. I'm tired. It was a long day." He nodded, but I could see he didn't believe me. "Morwenna, if there's something you need to tell me—" "There's nothing to tell," I cut him off. "Can we please just go to sleep?" But sleep didn't come easily. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. What if Elliot had already seen the photo? What if someone from his school had seen it and told him? What if... My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Rachel. "We need to talk. Call me tomorrow." The next morning brought fresh horror. I was barely through the office door when my coworker Amanda approached with a sly grin. "So," she said, perching on the edge of my desk, "heard you had an interesting girls' night the other week." My blood went cold. "What do you mean?" "Oh, come on. The photo's been making the rounds. You and that gorgeous bartender looking very... friendly." "I don't know what photo you're talking about." Amanda raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because it was pretty clear. And honestly, I don't blame you. Your husband seems nice enough, but a little boring, right? Sometimes a girl needs some excitement." "There's nothing exciting happening," I said firmly. "And I'd appreciate it if people would stop gossiping about my personal life." "Hey, no judgment here. We've all been there. Just be careful, okay? These things have a way of getting complicated." As Amanda walked away, I realized with growing horror that my private moment with Liam had become public entertainment. How many people had seen that photo? How many were talking about it, speculating about my marriage, judging my choices? I needed to control the narrative before it spiraled completely out of control. That afternoon, I posted on Facebook a carefully crafted message about the challenges of marriage and the importance of trust and communication. I didn't mention the photo directly, but I made subtle references to misunderstandings and people jumping to conclusions. Then I called Rachel. "Finally," she said when she picked up, "I've been worried about you." "Worried about what?" "About what you're doing, Morwenna, about where this is heading." "I'm not doing anything. I had a conversation with a nice guy who made sure I got home safely. That's it." That's not what the photo looked like. The photo was taken out of context. It was a friendly hug goodbye. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. "Morwenna, I love you, but you're my sister, so I'm going to be honest with you. This is dangerous territory you're walking into." "What's dangerous about it?" "You're married. You have a daughter. You can't just..." "I can't just what? Have a conversation with another human being? Feel appreciated for once in my life? Is that what this is about? Feeling appreciated?" The question hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. Elliot barely notices I exist. When was the last time he complimented me? When was the last time he seemed genuinely interested in anything I had to say? "So you decided to get attention from some random bartender instead?" "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" I couldn't answer because I wasn't sure myself. All I knew was that Liam had made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years, and I wasn't ready to apologize for that. Look, Rachel continued when I didn't respond, I get that you're unhappy. But this isn't the way to fix it. You need to talk to Elliot, maybe see a marriage counselor. Elliot doesn't want to fix anything. He's perfectly content with our boring, passionless marriage. Have you asked him? I shouldn't have to ask him to love me. That's not what I meant, and you know it. But I was already shutting down, already building the walls that would protect me from having to examine my own behavior too closely. I have to go. Sophie needs help with her project. Morwenna, I hung up before she could finish whatever lecture she was preparing to deliver. That evening, Elliot came home with an unusual expression on his face. Not angry exactly, but determined in a way that made my stomach clench with anxiety. We need to talk, he said after Sophie had gone to bed. About what? I think you know. My mouth went dry. Actually, I don't. He pulled out his phone and showed me something, an email with an official letterhead. I've scheduled a meeting with a lawyer. The words hit me like a physical blow. A lawyer? What kind of lawyer? The kind that specializes in family law. Elliot, you're being ridiculous. Whatever you think you know. I know enough. His voice was calm, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he'd been yelling. I know you lied to me about how you got home the other night. I know there's a photo of you with another man circulating among your friends. I know you've been deleting text messages and acting guilty as hell for the past week. You've been checking my phone. I haven't had to. You've been so obvious about hiding things that I'd have to be blind not to notice. I felt the walls closing in around me. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. He's just a friend. He walked me home to make sure I was safe, that's all. A friend whose name you don't even know. The question caught me off guard. What? This friend of yours. What's his name? I opened my mouth to say Liam, then realized I'd never mentioned his name to Elliot. If I said it now, he'd know I'd been lying about the casual nature of our interaction. It doesn't matter what his name is. It doesn't matter. He nodded slowly. Right, just like it doesn't matter that you lied to me. Just like it doesn't matter that you're more interested in getting attention from strangers than working on your marriage. That's not fair, isn't it? He stood up, suddenly looking older than his 35 years. When's the last time you put half as much effort into us as you put into looking good for girls' night? When's the last time you flirted with me the way you flirted with that bartender? The accusation stung because it was partially true, but instead of acknowledging it, I went on the attack. When's the last time you gave me a reason to flirt with you? When's the last time you made me feel like you actually wanted me around? So this is my fault. I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm saying we both stopped trying a long time ago. And your solution was to try with someone else? I stopped, realizing that any protest would sound hollow now. I want to feel alive, Elliot. I want to feel like I matter to someone. You matter to Sophie. You matter to me. Do I? Because it doesn't feel like it. We stared at each other across the living room, years of accumulated resentment and disappointment hanging between us like a toxic cloud. The meeting is tomorrow at 2, Elliot said finally. I think you should be there. What kind of meeting? The kind where we figure out what happens next. As he walked upstairs, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and growing panic, I realized that my one night of feeling appreciated might have cost me everything that actually mattered. But even then, even as my marriage crumbled around me, part of me couldn't bring myself to regret those few moments of feeling desired and alive. And that, more than anything else, terrified me. The law office of Mitchell and Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a glass building downtown. All sleek furniture and neutral colors designed to project competence and discretion. I sat in the waiting area, my palms sweating as I clutched my purse and tried to prepare for whatever Elliot had planned. He'd left for work that morning, without saying a word, just kissed Sophie goodbye, and walked out the door like it was any other day. But I'd seen the manila folder on his desk, thick with papers and printouts, that he'd quickly covered when I walked into his study. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Rachel told me about your troubles. Call me when you can. Remember, you don't have to put up with controlling behavior." I almost laughed at the irony. My mother, who'd spent 30 years enabling my father's drinking and making excuses for his failures, was now giving me marriage advice. But her support felt good, even if it was misguided. "Mrs. Foyle," a receptionist appeared beside my chair. "Mr. Mitchell will see you now." The conference room was intimidating, a long polished table surrounded by leather chairs, law books lining the walls, everything designed to make you feel small and vulnerable. Elliot was already there, sitting across from a man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive suit. "Morwenna," Elliot said, standing as I entered. His voice was polite but cold, like I was a business associate rather than his wife. "Mr. Mitchell," the lawyer said, extending his hand. "Please, have a seat." I sat down across from Elliot, noting the way he avoided my eyes. The manila folder was open in front of him, its contents spread across the table like evidence at a crime scene. "I want to start by saying that this doesn't have to be adversarial," Mr. Mitchell began. "Mr. Foyle has asked me to mediate a discussion about the current state of your marriage and explore options for moving forward." "Moving forward?" I looked between the two men. "What does that mean?" "It means," Elliot said quietly, "that I think we need to be honest about what's happening between us." Mr. Mitchell gestured to the papers on the table. "Your husband has shared some concerns about recent events. I'd like to give you an opportunity to respond." My heart was hammering so hard I was sure they could hear it. "What kind of concerns?" Elliot reached for a photograph and slid it across the table. It was the picture from Jessica's Instagram, me and Liam outside my house, his arms around me, my face tilted up toward his. "This photo was taken outside your home at approximately 1:15 a.m. on October 15th, Elliot said in the same neutral tone he used when teaching his history classes. "You told me you came home alone in a cab." I stared at the photo, my mouth dry. "It's not what it looks like." "What does it look like, Mrs. Foyle?" Mr. Mitchell asked. "It looks like I'm hugging someone goodbye," which is exactly what I was doing. Elliot reached for another paper. "These are your text messages from that evening." He slid a printout across the table. "At 11:47 p.m., I asked what time you'd be home. At 12:23 a.m., I asked if you needed a ride. You didn't respond to either message." "I was having fun with my friends. I didn't want to be on my phone all night." "But you did respond to other messages." Another printout appeared. "At 12:45 a.m., you responded to a text from someone named Liam, asking if you made it home safely." The blood drained from my face. How had he gotten my text messages? "I have access to our phone records through our family plan," Elliot explained, reading my expression. "The messages are all time-stamped." Mr. Mitchell leaned forward. "Mrs. Foyle, is Liam the man in the photograph?" I wanted to lie, but the evidence was right there in black and white. "Yes." "And how do you know Liam?" He was the bartender that night. He offered to walk me home because it was late and I'd been drinking." "That was thoughtful of him," Mr. Mitchell said neutrally. "How long did this walk take?" I tried to calculate the timeline in my head. "I don't know, maybe 20 minutes. Elliot reached for yet another paper. "According to the GPS data from your phone, you left the bar at 12:52 a.m. and arrived home at 1:18 a.m. That's 26 minutes to walk 6 blocks. We walked slowly. I was wearing heels. You also made a phone call during this walk," Elliot continued relentlessly. "At 1:02 a.m., you called Liam's number. The call lasted 4 minutes. I felt like I was drowning. I think I accidentally dialed him when I was trying to call a cab. A 4-minute accidental call. We talked briefly. He was making sure I was okay." Mr. Mitchell made a note on his legal pad. "Mrs. Foyle, what exactly is your relationship with Liam?" "There is no relationship. I met him that night. He was nice to me, and he made sure I got home safely. That's all." But you've been in contact since then. My silence was answer enough. Elliot reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small device I recognized with growing horror, his dash cam. I thought this was missing, I said weakly. I removed it to download the footage, Elliot replied. I was curious about what might have been recorded the night you came home late. He connected the device to a laptop and turned the screen toward me. The video was grainy and dark, shot through a car windshield, but it was clear enough to make out two figures standing close together on a residential sidewalk. This was recorded from my car at 1:15 a.m., Elliot said, as we watched the silent footage. I'd driven around looking for you when you didn't answer my texts. I was worried something had happened. On the screen, I watched myself embrace Liam, watched the way we stood together talking, watched the intimate body language that made it obvious this wasn't just a polite goodbye between strangers. You can see here, Elliot said, pausing the video, that this interaction lasts approximately 3 minutes. This is not the behavior of someone saying goodbye to a helpful stranger. I felt sick. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. But I wasn't ready to surrender completely. Okay, fine. I found him attractive. I was flattered by his attention, but nothing happened. We talked, we hugged, he left. That's it. Mrs. Foyle, Mr. Mitchell said gently, your husband isn't accusing you of having a physical affair, but emotional infidelity can be just as damaging to a marriage. Emotional infidelity? I laughed, but it came out shrill and desperate. I had a conversation with someone who made me feel good about myself. Since when is that a crime? Since you lied about it, Elliot said quietly. Since you deleted his number from your phone the next morning. Since you've been acting guilty and defensive ever since. I deleted his number because I knew you'd react exactly like this. Like what? Like a husband who's concerned that his wife is seeking emotional intimacy with other men. The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Mr. Mitchell closed his notepad and looked between us. I think it would be helpful, he said, if you both took some time to consider what you want from this marriage going forward. Mr. Foyle, you've made it clear that you feel betrayed and that trust has been broken. Mrs. Foyle, you've expressed feeling unappreciated and disconnected. These are not insurmountable problems, but they do require both parties to be committed to honest communication and rebuilding trust. What if one party isn't interested in rebuilding? Elliot asked. The question hung in the air like a challenge. I realized he wasn't asking hypothetically. He was asking me directly whether I was willing to fight for our marriage, or if I'd already checked out emotionally. I never said I wasn't interested, I said. You didn't have to say it. Your actions made it clear. Mr. Mitchell reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick packet of papers. I've prepared some documents for you both to review. These outline the legal options available should you decide that reconciliation isn't possible. He slid the packet across the table to me. The words on the top page seemed to swim before my eyes. Petition for dissolution of marriage. This is really happening? I whispered. That depends on you, Elliot said, on whether you're willing to be honest about what you want and what you're willing to do to get it. I stared at the divorce papers, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. This wasn't just about a walk home or a flirtation or even my feelings of loneliness and neglect. This was about the fundamental breakdown of trust between two people who'd promised to love and honor each other. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I began to understand that I might have lost something irreplaceable in my quest to feel alive again. I need time to think, I said. Of course, Mr. Mitchell replied, but I should mention that Mr. Foyle has also prepared a preliminary custody arrangement for your daughter. Given the current circumstances, he's requesting primary physical custody with supervised visitation initially. The words hit me like a physical blow. Supervised visitation? Sophie is my daughter. And she'll remain your daughter, Elliot said, but she needs stability right now. She needs to know that at least one of her parents is committed to putting her needs first. I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and saw not anger or vindictiveness, but profound sadness. He wasn't trying to punish me. He was trying to protect our daughter from the chaos I'd brought into our lives. And that realization hurt more than any accusation or evidence he could have presented. I should go, I said, standing on unsteady legs. Mrs. Foyle, Mr. Mitchell called as I reached the door. These documents need to be filed within 30 days. If Mr. Foyle decides to proceed, I'd encourage you to seek your own legal representation. I nodded without turning around and walked out of the office, carrying the divorce papers like a death sentence. In the elevator, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not for my marriage, which I was beginning to realize had been over long before that night with Liam, but for my daughter, who would pay the price for my selfish choices. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I started to understand that some mistakes can't be undone, no matter how much you want to take them back. The text came at 7:23 a.m. while I was making Sophie's lunch. We need to talk, all of us, tonight at 7. Jessica. It was followed immediately by messages from the rest of my friend group, Sarah, Amanda, even quiet Lisa, who rarely initiated group conversations. They'd clearly been discussing me, and whatever they'd decided wasn't good. I spent the day at work in a fog of anxiety, unable to concentrate on spreadsheets, while my mind raced through possible scenarios. Had they seen more evidence? Had someone talked to Elliot? Were they planning some kind of intervention? The meeting was at Jessica's house, a sprawling suburban colonial that always made me feel inadequate with its perfectly coordinated throw pillows and spotless kitchen. I arrived to find the entire group already assembled in her living room, their faces wearing identical expressions of uncomfortable concern. "Morwenna," Jessica said, gesturing to an empty chair positioned opposite the rest of them, like I was facing a tribunal. "Thanks for coming." "This feels very formal," I said, trying to inject some lightness into the atmosphere. "Should I be worried?" "We're worried about you," Sarah said. "About what's happening with your marriage, with this whole situation." I sat down, clutching my purse in my lap like armor. "What situation?" "Don't," Amanda said sharply. "Don't pretend you don't know why we're here." Lisa, who usually played peacekeeper, leaned forward in her chair. "We've been talking, and we think you need to hear some hard truths from people who care about you." "Hard truths about what?" "About the fact that you're destroying your marriage over some bartender you barely know," Jessica said bluntly. The accusation hit like a slap. "I'm not destroying anything. Elliot's the one who's threatening divorce." "Because you cheated on him." Sarah's voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. "I didn't cheat. I had a conversation with someone who treated me like a human being instead of a piece of furniture." "You emotionally cheated," Amanda corrected, "which is still cheating." "Says who?" "Says your husband, apparently," Jessica said. "He called me yesterday." I sat frozen as Jessica's words landed. "Elliot called me, asked about that night at the bar, how you and Liam were acting, if it was a pattern." My blood went cold. "What did you tell him?" "The truth," she said gently. "You flirted with the bartender all evening. Seemed more interested in his attention than us. Lit up when he offered to walk you home. The walls closed in. You had no right discussing my marriage." "He's scared," Lisa added. "Thinks it's falling apart. He's trying to understand why." "Our marriage died years ago," I snapped. "Then why not fix it?" Sarah pressed. "Counseling, talking, anything besides chasing validation from a stranger." "Because I was tired of being invisible." "So you sought attention elsewhere instead of fixing the real issue," Amanda said. "You made your happiness someone else's job." Her words cut deep, carrying truth I'd avoided. I looked around at these women, friends for over a decade, seeing judgment where I'd expected support. "You're all taking his side," I said, voice shaking. "We're trying to help you see what you're throwing away," Lisa replied sadly. I stood abruptly. "If this is friendship, I don't want it." I stormed out, slamming the door. In the car, angry tears fell. My oldest friends had called me selfish, destructive. But a quiet voice whispered, they might be right. I'd looked for excuses to end my marriage long before Liam. At home, Elliot helped Sophie with her family tree project. She hugged me, chattering about adding, people who love us. Elliot's eyes met mine, sad, resigned. That night, I stared at a blank apology letter to him, words failing. He appeared in the doorway. Court date's set for next month, he said quietly. I turned, seeing exhaustion etched into him. Elliot, this isn't punishment, he continued. It's protecting Sophie, protecting myself. I can't live wondering if you're seeking happiness elsewhere. I'm sorry, I whispered, for the lies, the betrayal, everything. I know, he said, and I'm sorry too, for letting our marriage reach this point. We stood in silence, two people who'd once promised forever, acknowledging its end with fragile grace. 6 months later, in my small apartment, I read Sophie a bedtime story during my weekend visit. Custody had progressed, supervised to unsupervised, thanks to counseling and parenting classes. Mummy, are you happy now? She asked. I smiled. I'm learning to be happy with myself. She snuggled closer. Daddy's happier too. Driving home, I reflected. I'd lost my marriage, most friends, nearly my daughter. But I'd gained honesty, self-awareness, and a chance to rebuild with Sophie based on truth. Liam's text went unanswered. The bar night was a distant mistake. I'd chased validation and destroyed what mattered. Now, in my quiet apartment, Sophie's laughter still echoed. I'd learned happiness wasn't someone else's responsibility. It was mine to create. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough.